Hello, my fellow knights and warriors, and today I'm going to continue my explanation of Cry Havoc rules, and we will focus on hand-to-hand combat. Hand-to-hand combat in Cry Havoc is very easy, like everything else in this system, but if you played any other games of this family, like Norman Saga, Sherwood, etc., you will find that some things that are quite obvious in these games have no effect in the Cry Havoc. So, first of all, when you moved all your units, you can tell who is going to attack who. You have to declare your attacks before you are going to make them. Next, you have to choose if you are going to attack, for example, together or alone. Let's say we have two surgeons here, and they can attack together, and if they are going to do so, they have to double their strength, so it will be 21, but they cannot attack separately. So you cannot, for example, make attack with Sergeant Wood first and then with Sergeant Martin. If they are going to attack, they have to attack together. If only one of them is going to attack, the other character cannot attack next to him. So this is one of the very important difference. Another thing that you need to take cover and remember about is the special rule about knights. If there are knights on the adjacent hexes during the combat phase, they have to fight each other only. It simulates the situation when knights are fighting duel. They are not engaging in any other combat. They are simply ignoring all the commoners around, and they are going to fight against each other in the knight-to-knight duel. So, for example, if Sir Clegane would and Ben would be on the same side, they wouldn't be able to attack Sir Gaston, because Sir Clegane has to fight his duel against Sir Gaston alone. So no option for them to attack together. They can only attack Sir Clegane can only attack Sir Gaston. Of course, there will be no knight, but only two normal warriors. They would be able to attack Sir Gaston as they like. So when you know who is going to attack who, you have to check for possibility of attacks, because there might be a situation when your character is not available to attack enemy even if he's adjacent to you. For example, let's assume that Guy would be here in the wood. Wood is off limit hex for Sir Clegane because he cannot enter wood hex, so he wouldn't be able to attack Guy. The same situation occurs here. Sir Gaston is on this adjacent hex to Guy, but Guy, this time, is on the other side of the window. And since Sir Gaston cannot cross a window on his horse, he cannot attack Guy. So this is pretty important to remember. And okay, let's assume we know who is going to attack who. We checked if attacks are allowed or not, and now we can tell we can check for the combat results. So, again, we will face something very different from Norman Saga series. We are not subtracting character strength, but instead we are checking the odds. So, for example, they are attacking Ben together, so they have 21 versus 6. So it will be 3 to 1. He will have 26 versus 6, so it will be 4 to 1. 7 versus 4, 1 to 1, because we have to always round the odds down in the favor of the defender. Here we have 11 versus 1, so it will be 11 to 1. And since we know the odds, we can make shifts. And first of all, there is no modifier for double attacks. In the games of Norman Saga family, you get a modifier when you are attacking with 2 or more characters against 1. Then you get a column shift in the favor of the attacker. No such column shift in this game. So no matter how many characters you have, you don't get a modifier for the number of the attackers. That's pretty bad. And next, you have to check for the shifts for combat in the certain terrain. Like in every game of this system, you get three possible modifiers when it comes to the terrain. It can be disadvantage, neutral, or advantage. You take effect on terrain on combat table and compare the terrain that attacker is versus the terrain defender is, and see if you get any shifts. So, for example, if attacker is in terrain with 0 and defender is in the terrain with minus, move up one column on a combat result table. So if there is, for example, plus in attacker and minus in the defender, move up 2 columns. If the terrain is the same, you get no shifts. That's pretty obvious. If in case of your knights, this is another thing that we need to cover. First of all, there is no front for knights, so they can attack enemies no matter where they are, as long as they are adjacent to him. So, for example, if a guy would be there, then Sir Clagny would be able to attack him as well. As you know, in the Norman Saga, you can only attack enemies that are one of the front hex of your mounted warriors, but in this game he can be anywhere as long as he's adjacent to Sir Clagny, then Sir Clagny would be able to attack him. And if your mounted character takes 2 hexes, you have always include the most disadvantageous terrain. So for example here, he takes 1 hex with clear terrain and 1 hex with slope. So you check that flat ground gives 0 and slope gives minus. So in this combat he gets minus because one of the hex is slope. So if you know the final odds, you have to make 1d10 roll and see for the results. There are 2 combat results table. One when you are fighting versus mounted opponents, and one when you are fighting against infantry. Results are quite obvious. Your character can be wounded, stunned, killed, or when it comes to the characters that are mounted, they can be also dismounted, or their horse can be killed. So the results are pretty self-explanatory, and it is no problem to understand how they work. And if your character is stunned or wounded, and he gets stunned as well, he is dead. So I guess this is quite obvious that stunned character cannot defend himself. So if he is wounded or stunned again, this means that he's hit in the head again, and this hit is so hard that his skull just cracks and his brain splatter all over, like in the very gory way, just like in the normal battlefield. So that should be all. Not all. There are also animals on the battlefield. Usually pack mules, sometimes riderless horses. If you are fighting against such animal, you always use table which is against mounted opponents, but you ignore the result about rider. You simply check what this result brings to animal. So for example, horse killed, horse unarmed, horse killed, horse unarmed, horse killed, because animal cannot be wounded. Animal can also only be killed or in the good health. So that's all when it comes to the basic rules of the Cry Havoc combat. I will be able to show you how everything works in the next videos, because I plan to make a couple of videos with gameplays from this game, so you will be able to see how it works. Oh, one last thing, and you see that a lot of these characters have this defense in circle, means they have an armor. Yes, this is one of the things that were brought later, because in the original Cry Havoc there was no armors. So if you are going to resolve a combat, you have to ignore the rules that were brought by the later games when it comes to the armor. You know, when your character wear armor, wears armor and it is attacked in combat or by in the missile combat, it gets usually a bonus. But in original Cry Havoc there were no armors, so if you play original Cry Havoc scenarios, it is advised to ignore armor rules. Of course, nothing makes you to not use armor rules. It is completely free to use them, but just take care that original Cry Havoc has no rules for armor. And now, at the end, let's talk about one important difference between Norman Saga and Cry Havoc. These are combat tables. As you know, in the combat in the Norman Saga, you use the subtraction, and here you have to compare. What it brings? It means that in the Cry Havoc, it is significantly harder to kill your opponent with hand-to-hand combat, and it's much easier to kill him with missile combat. This was kinda corrected in the Norman Saga, where it is quite a bit harder to kill enemy with missile weapons, and it's bit easier to kill enemy with hand-to-hand combat. One of the major flaws in the Cry Havoc is absence of this rule that gives you one column shift for more warriors on your side. As you can see, if you have 1-to-1 odds, it is almost impossible to deal any damage to the enemy. You can only make him to retreat one hex, and he may not advance on the hexes that are adjacent to the enemy, and you will get this result only if you will roll 1. Otherwise, you might get B, which means attacker to retreat, or A, which means attacker is wounded. And this is one of the things that always puzzled me, because you are fighting a duel 1-to-1 versus opponent who has the same strength, same weapon and same armor as you. Is this means that you cannot do much damage to him? No, your chances are the same for both sides, and according to this table, your chances to score any damage of him are almost impossible. And this is something that never really worked for me when it comes to the Cry Havoc rules.